Welcome to our deep dive into thinking fast and slow.
Oh, yeah.
This book by Daniel Kahneman
Mm-hmm.
is a fascinating exploration of how our minds work,
Right.
delving into the two systems of thinking.
Yeah.
He calls System 1 and System 2.
Uh-huh.
And don't forget,
Yeah.
a link to the full book can be found in the description or pinned comment
Okay.
if you want to go even deeper
Sure.
after a
Absolutely.
dive.
So what makes this book so captivating
Mm-hmm.
is how Kahneman reveals these two distinct ways our minds operate.
Yeah.
Imagine them as two characters
Much-
in your head, constantly interacting and influencing your every thought and decision.
I love that analogy.
Yeah.
It's like having a dynamic duo
Yeah.
inside our heads,
Mm-hmm.
but they don't always agree, do they?
Not always.
Yeah.
And that's where things get really interesting.
Okay.
System 1
Mm-hmm.
is your fast, intuitive side, like
Yeah.
your gut feeling jumping in to make quick judgments based on instinct and emotion.
Okay.
Think of it as your autopilot.
So it's like System 1 is all about speed and efficiency,
Exactly.
making snap decisions
Yeah.
without overthinking things.
And this system is incredibly useful in everyday life, allowing you to navigate routine situations
Yeah.
and react quickly to potential threats.
But as Kahneman points out,
Uh-huh.
this reliance on intuition can also lead to biases.
Right.
We discussed the bat and ball problem earlier,
Yeah.
where System 1 jumps to an incorrect answer
Uh-huh.
because it seems plausible at first glance.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Kahneman calls this,
Yeah.
what you see is all there is,
Mhm.
or WYSIAD for short.
Okay.
It's the tendency to base judgments
Right.
on the limited information readily available
Mhm.
without considering
Mhm.
what might be missing.
It's like trying to solve a puzzle
Yes,
with only half the pieces.
precisely. And this is where System 2 comes in. This system is slower, more deliberate and analytical. It's the voice of reason that steps in
Yeah.
when you need to solve complex problems.
Right.
Weigh options carefully
Mm.
and challenge those impulsive urges from System 1.
So it's like System 2 is our inner fact checker,
Exactly.
carefully scrutinizing the information
Yeah.
and making sure we're not jumping to conclusions.
Well, there's a catch.
Okay.
System 2 is lazy.
Uh-oh.
It takes effort to engage this system.
Right.
And we often prefer the easy route,
Yeah.
accepting those quick System 1 responses,
Mm-hmm.
even when they might be flawed.
Kahneman shares a compelling anecdote about an experiment where participants, crimed with words
Okay.
associated with old age,
Mhm.
actually walked slower afterward.
Yeah.
It's a powerful example of the unconscious influence of System 1.
It's a great illustration
Yeah.
of how subtle cues
Uh-huh.
can prime our thinking and affect our behavior without us even realizing it.
Right.
And that's why understanding these two systems is crucial.
Yeah.
By recognizing their strengths and weaknesses,
Mm-hmm.
you can start to make more conscious and informed decisions in every aspect of your life.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So we've got these two characters, System 1 and System 2,
Right.
constantly duking it out in our minds.
Yeah.
But how does this play out in our daily lives?
Okay.
How do these systems influence our decisions
Right.
and shape our view of the world?
That's where the concept of heuristics and biases comes into play.
Mm-hmm.
Heuristics are mental shortcuts.
Okay.
Those quick rules of thumb your mind uses to simplify
Right.
complex situations and make fast judgments.
Okay.
They're essential for navigating our busy lives.
Right.
But they can also lead to systematic errors in thinking.
Yeah.
Those biases we've been talking about.
So it's like our brains are trying to be efficient,
Precisely.
but sometimes those shortcuts lead us down the wrong path.
Take the availability heuristic, for example.
Okay.
It's the tendency to judge the frequency or likelihood
Uh-huh.
of something happening
Mm-hmm.
based on how easily examples come to mind.
Okay.
Think about how a recent news story
Yeah.
about a plane crash might make you feel more anxious about flying,
Right.
even though statistically flying is still incredibly safe.
Or imagine scrolling through social media
Right.
and seeing post after post about people getting promotions or landing their dream jobs.
Yeah.
It might make you feel like you're falling behind,
Yeah.
even though you're only seeing a curated snapshot of reality.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The availability heuristic
Mm-hmm.
can really skew your perception of the world,
Right.
making you overestimate the likelihood
Uh-uh.
of events that are vivid,
Yeah.
memorable,
Okay.
or emotionally charged.
It's like our brains are wired.
You got it. To prioritize the sensational over the statistical.
And this bias
Right.
can have a significant impact on your decisions,
Yeah.
especially when it comes to assessing risk.
Kahneman also talks about the illusion of causality, right?
Absolutely.
Our tendency to see patterns and connections,
Yeah.
even in random events.
Our minds crave
Yeah.
order and predictability.
Okay.
So we often impose patterns where none exist.
Mm-hmm.
He uses the example of the hot hand in basketball,
Okay.
where a player hitting a few shots in a row
Right.
is perceived as having some magical ability,
Right.
even though statistically
Yeah.
it's likely just random chance.
So we're essentially creating stories
Precisely.
to explain events,
Yeah.
even when those stories aren't grounded in reality.
And this tendency to find meaning in randomness
Right.
can lead to all sorts of misconceptions and faulty predictions.
Another bias that can really trip us up is anchoring, right?
The anchoring effect
Yeah.
is incredibly powerful.
It's the tendency to be influenced
Mm.
by an initial piece of information,
Mhm.
even if that information is completely arbitrary or
Right.
irrelevant.
Yeah.
It's like setting a mental anchor
Okay.
that pulls your judgments in a
Mm.
particular direction.
Can you give us an example of how this plays out in everyday life?
Imagine you're negotiating the price of a used car.
Okay.
The seller throws out a ridiculously high number
Mm.
as their starting point.
Yeah.
Even though you know it's inflated,
Right.
that initial price anchors your perception
Uh-huh.
of the car's value,
Yeah.
making you more likely to agree
Mm.
to a higher price
Okay.
than you would have otherwise.
So it's like that first number, even if it's absurd,
Exactly.
sets the stage for the entire negotiation.
And this anchoring effect
Right.
can happen in all sorts of situations,
Right.
from salary negotiations
Yeah.
to investment decisions.
Okay.
Being aware of this bias
Right.
is crucial for making informed choices and avoiding being swayed
Right.
by arbitrary anchors.
Knowing how susceptible we are to anchoring
Yeah.
and all these other biases,
Mhm.
is there anything we can do
Mhm.
to become more rational decision makers?
There's definitely hope.
Okay.
Kahneman doesn't just leave us with a list of our cognitive shortcomings.
Okay. Okay.
He offers some practical strategies for overcoming these biases and making more deliberate choices.
Okay. I'm all ears.
Right.
Give us some tools for fighting back against these sneaky biases.
One of the most powerful strategies is to develop the habit of considering the outside view.
The outside view. Okay.
Instead of getting caught up
Mhm.
in the specifics of your situation and your gut feelings,
Yeah.
step back and look at the bigger picture.
Okay.
Consider the base rates, the statistical data of
Yeah.
similar situations.
So by asking yourself, what typically happens in cases like this?
Yes.
Rather than relying solely on your own intuition,
Right.
which might be clouded by those biases.
Kahneman highlights the work of Bent Fleivjerg,
Okay.
who studied project planning
Uh-huh.
and found that planners
Wait.
often fall prey
Yeah.
to the planning fallacy,
Okay.
underestimating the time, cost,
Oh.
and risks of projects.
The planning fallacy.
Ex-
We've all been there, right?
Yeah.
Underestimating how long it'll take to finish a project
Uh-huh.
or overestimating how much we can accomplish in a day.
But Fleivjerg found
Oh.
that by taking the outside view, by comparing their projects to the actual track record of similar projects,
Okay.
planners could make much more realistic and accurate estimates.
So by looking beyond our own limited perspective
Precisely.
and considering the broader context,
Right?
we can make more informed decisions
Yeah.
and avoid those pitfalls of overconfidence and wishful thinking.
And here's another powerful tool,
Okay.
algorithms.
Algorithms, okay.
Kahneman argues that in situations where biases are likely to creep in,
Right.
a simple formula or algorithm
Right.
can often outperform
Yeah.
even expert judgment.
Give us an example of how algorithms can make better decisions.
Think about the APGAR score,
Okay.
which is used to assess the health of newborn babies.
Right.
It's a simple scoring system
Uh-huh.
that looks at a few key indicators,
Okay.
like heart rate and breathing, and it's incredibly effective
Yeah.
because it provides a standardized objective assessment,
Right.
reducing the chance of human error and bias.
Or consider those pre-flight checklists
Exactly.
that pilots use.
Uh-huh.
They might seem mundane,
Yeah,
but they help ensure that even the most experienced pilot
right.
doesn't accidentally skip a critical step.
Sometimes those simple, systematic approaches can be far more reliable than relying solely on intuition, especially in high-stakes situations.
So we've got the outside view and the power of algorithms in our toolkit for combating those pesky biases.
Well, he also dives deep into how our emotions can influence our decisions, especially when it comes to risk and loss. He introduces this fascinating concept called prospect theory.
Let's dive into that. What is prospect theory all about?
All right.
And how does it relate to our emotional responses to gains and losses?
Prospect theory challenges the traditional economic view that we're all perfectly rational decision makers. It shows how deeply our emotions, particularly our aversion to loss, shape our choices.
This idea of loss aversion is fascinating to me. Kahneman says that the pain of losing something is actually felt more intensely than the pleasure of gaining something of equal value.
Exactly.
It's like that old saying, losses loom larger than gains.
You're wired to avoid losses. Even if it means missing out on potential gains.
Can you give us some real-world examples?
Sure.
Of this loss aversion at play?
Imagine you're negotiating a salary. And you're thrilled to get a 5% raise. But then you find out a colleague with similar experience got a 7% raise. Suddenly that 5% doesn't feel so great anymore, right?
No, not really.
You're fixated on that 2% you didn't get, that perceived loss. Rather than the actual gain.
Or think about selling stocks. We tend to hold on to losing stocks for too long, hoping they'll bounce back. Even though it might be more rational to cut our losses and invest elsewhere. On the flip side, we might sell winning stocks too early. Just to lock in a sure gain. Even if they have more potential to grow.
You've got it. Loss aversion can be costly, preventing us from taking calculated risks and making us hold on to things. She should probably let go of. But, a link to the full book can be found in the description or pinned comment. If you wanted to explore this and other fascinating concepts in more detail. That's a great reminder. Now, another fascinating concept Kahneman explores is framing effects.
It's remarkable how sensitive we are to these subtle changes in framing. Kahneman gives the example of medical treatments. Imagine being told a surgery has a 90% survival rate. That sounds pretty reassuring, right?
Definitely.
But what if you were told the surgery has a 10% mortality rate? It's the same information, just framed differently. But it suddenly feels much riskier.
Absolutely. That word mortality evokes a much stronger emotional response than survival, even though the statistics are identical.
And these framing effects aren't just limited to individual choices. They can impact public policy as well. Kahneman talks about fuel efficiency labels on cars. Traditionally, they focused on miles per gallon or MPG. But research shows that people are often misled by this frame. Assuming the difference between 30 MPG and 40 MPG is the same as the difference between 15 MPG and 25 MPG, which isn't true.
So what's the solution?
Well, Kahneman suggests changing how information is presented. In the fuel efficiency example, he proposes using a gallons per mile frame instead of MPG. This frame more accurately reflects the actual fuel savings, helping people make more informed choices. It's all about finding frames that align with our intuitive understanding and help us avoid those mental pitfalls.
So by understanding how framing affects our perceptions, we can become more critical consumers of information.
And make choices that align with our true preferences.
And speaking of aligning with our intuition, Kahneman also delves into the powerful role of the default option.
Tell us more about that.
All right.
How can default options influence our behavior?
Think about organ donation. In some countries, you have to actively opt in to become an organ donor. In others, organ donation is the default. And you have to opt out if you don't want to participate. Guess which countries have significantly higher organ donation rates?
Those with the opt-out system, I presume.
Exactly. Just by changing the default option, we can nudge people towards choices that often align with our actual preferences.
It's fascinating how something so seemingly simple can have such a significant impact on our behavior.
It's a subtle but powerful tool that can be used to promote beneficial choices without restricting people's freedom to choose differently.
Okay.
Now let's shift gears a bit and talk about how we experience and remember our lives. Kahneman introduces a fascinating distinction between the experiencing self and the remembering self.
Okay, let's unpack that.
Right.
What's the difference between these two selves?
The experiencing self is the one living in the present moment, feeling all the sensations and emotions of what's happening right now.
Okay.
The remembering self is the one that reconstructs memories of those experiences, creating the narrative of your life.
So it's the difference between actually living an experience.
Precisely.
And the story we tell ourselves.
Right.
About that experience later on.
And what's interesting is these two selves don't always agree.
Okay.
The remembering self prioritizes certain aspects of an experience, leading to some interesting distortions in how we recall events.
Give us an example of how the remembering self can distort our memories.
Kahneman describes an intriguing experiment called the cold hand situation.
Cold hand situation.
Okay. Participants had to submerge their hand in painfully cold water.
Right.
There were two versions.
Okay.
A short version and a long version.
Okay.
The long version involved slightly less painful water.
Okay.
But it lasted longer.
So objectively, the long version involved more total pain, right?
Yes.
Okay.
But here's the twist.
Okay.
When participants were later asked which version they'd prefer to repeat, many chose the long version.
Why would they choose more pain? That doesn't seem rational.
It's because the remembering self doesn't simply add up all the pain experienced over time. It focuses more on the peak intensity of the pain and the feeling at the end of the experience in the long version.
Right.
Even though the total pain was greater,
right,
the ending was slightly less painful, and this ending dominated the memory.
So the remembering self prioritized the ending.
Exactly.
Over the overall duration.
Yeah.
Leading to a seemingly irrational choice.
It's a fascinating example of how our memories can be shaped by cognitive biases, leading us to make choices that don't always align with our actual lived experiences.
This whole concept of the remembering self really makes you think about how we evaluate our lives.
Right.
We often base our judgments of happiness on these reconstructed memories rather than the sum of our experiences.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And this leads us to another intriguing concept.
Okay.
Kahneman explores the focusing illusion.
Focusing illusion, okay.
It's the tendency to overestimate the impact of a single event or aspect of life on your overall well-being.
Okay.
When you focus your attention on something, it takes on disproportionate importance, creating a distorted view of reality.
Can you give us an example?
Sure.
Of how this focusing illusion might play out?
Imagine you're considering a major life change.
Okay.
Like moving to a new city.
Okay.
You might fixate on a particular aspect of that change, like a shorter commute or a more exciting social scene, and overestimate its impact on your overall happiness.
Right.
You might tell yourself, if only I could live in that vibrant city, I'd be so much happier.
But in reality, there are so many other factors that contribute to happiness.
Yeah.
Things that might not be as immediately apparent or exciting.
And once the novelty wears off, you might find that your overall happiness hasn't changed that much.
Yeah.
The focusing illusion can lead us to chase after things
that ultimately won't bring us the lasting fulfillment we seek.
So it's important to be aware of this tendency.
Precisely.
To overemphasize the importance of specific events or aspects of life and to consider the bigger picture, the full tapestry of experiences that shape our well-being.
And Kahneman's research shows that major life events, both positive and negative, often have a smaller and shorter-lived impact on our happiness than we anticipate.
Okay.
Our emotional systems tend to adapt over time.
Right.
And our baseline level of happiness often returns to a relatively stable state.
This is such a powerful insight. It really makes you reconsider how much weight we should give to those individual events when evaluating our lives as a whole.
And that brings us back to the interplay between System 1 and System 2.
Kahneman argues that these systems play a key role not only in our decision-making, but also in how we experience and remember our lives.
So remind us again, what are the key characteristics of these two systems, and how do they influence our experience of happiness?
System 1, your fast intuitive system is largely responsible for your moment-to-moment feelings of happiness or unhappiness. It reacts to the stimuli around you, generating those immediate emotional responses.
So it's like System 1 is constantly scanning our environment, giving us quick thumbs up or thumbs down signals about how we're feeling.
It makes sense from an evolutionary perspective. We needed a system that could quickly assess threats and rewards, guiding us toward pleasurable experiences and away from danger.
But as we've seen, System 1 isn't always accurate. It can lead to those biases and focusing illusions that distort our perceptions.
And that's where System 2, the slower, more analytical system, comes in. It can step back, analyze the situation, and challenge those initial assessments from System 1.
It's like System 2 is our quality control manager.
Exactly.
Making sure our emotional responses are appropriate and align with our long-term goals and values.
And this interplay between the two systems is fascinating. Kahneman suggests we can learn to use System 2 more effectively to become more aware of our biases and to make deliberate choices that align with what truly matters to us.
So we can train our minds to be more rational, more thoughtful, and ultimately lead more fulfilling lives.
It is.
This is really empowering stuff.
And this is just the tip of the iceberg. When it comes to the insights Kahneman offers in thinking fast and slow.
I know, right? We've barely scratched the surface.
Yeah.
But we've already uncovered so much about how our minds work. How we make decisions and how we experience the world.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's a book that really makes you think, challenging you to be more mindful of the often hidden forces that shape your thoughts, feelings, and behaviors.
Well, on that note, let's shift our focus to some final key takeaways from our dive and leave our listeners with some thought-provoking questions to ponder. Welcome back to our deep dive into thinking fast and slow. We've been exploring the fascinating world of Daniel Kahneman's research, uncovering the hidden biases and mental shortcuts that shape our thinking.
It's been a journey into the depths of our own minds, hasn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Before we wrap up our dive, let's surface with some key takeaways. One of the most powerful insights from Kahneman's work is this idea of the two systems of thinking. System 1, the fast, intuitive, and emotional system. And System 2, the slower, more deliberate, and analytical system.
Understanding the interplay between these two systems is crucial for navigating the complexities of decision-making. Recognizing when System 1 is likely to lead you astray. And knowing how to engage System 2 to challenge those intuitive judgments can make all the difference.
We've also explored a whole range of cognitive biases. They can distort our perceptions and influence our choices. The availability heuristic, anchoring effects, loss aversion, framing biases. These are just a few of the mental shortcuts that can trip us up.
But the good news is that awareness is key. By understanding these biases, you can start to counteract their influence. You can question your assumptions, consider alternative perspectives, and take the time to think things through more carefully.
Kahneman offers practical tools for becoming more aware of these biases and making more conscious choices, considering the outside view, using simple algorithms when appropriate, and being mindful of how our emotions and memories can shape our perceptions. These are just a few of the strategies we've discussed.
And remember, it's not about becoming some kind of emotionless robot.
Right.
Emotions are a vital part of what makes us human.
Yeah.
It's about finding that balance between intuition and reason.
Right.
Between feeling and thinking.
Thinking Fast and Slow offers a roadmap for finding that balance and becoming more mindful decision makers. And for those who want to explore these ideas in more depth, a link to the full book can be found in the description or pinned comment.
It's a book that can truly change the way you see the world and yourself.
Absolutely.
Now, before we go, I want to leave you with a thought-provoking question.
Go.
Inspired by Kahneman's work.
Okay.
How might being aware of these cognitive biases change your approach to decision-making in various aspects of your life?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
How might you approach a negotiation differently, knowing about anchoring?
Right.
Or how might you evaluate a risky opportunity, understanding loss aversion? Or how might you reframe a challenging situation to find a more positive and empowering perspective?
Those are questions worth pondering.
Yeah.
Take some time to reflect on how these insights might impact your choices and behaviors. The journey of understanding our own minds is ongoing, and there's always more to discover.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into thinking fast and slow.
Right.
We hope you've surfaced with some valuable insights and a renewed curiosity about the amazing power of the human mind.
Right.
Until next time,
okay.
keep thinking, keep exploring, and keep diving deep.